Legend of Total War here, and today Creative Assembly posted a blog on the Siege Proving Ground. So this will give people an opportunity to opt into it, check out the changes they want to make, and then maybe based on feedback, this will be put into a major patch, maybe 6.3 later down the track. So what I'm going to go through is mainly just their ideas, give some feedback, what I think about these ideas, and I'd love to hear your ideas as well. Because obviously if they want to do something and we think it's a bad idea, it's a good opportunity to say so that they don't do it, because they're going to base it based on feedback. Not just feedback from people that play it, but also from comments and forums and everything. So it's a good time to have your voice heard if you want. All of the stuff is always optional. So yeah, I'm just going to just give my thoughts in this video, as we usually do with these sort of blog videos, and love to hear your thoughts as well. So the sieges with Total War Warhammer 3 has always been a major problem, probably one of the biggest blights on the game. Really terrible foundation that they brought in from Total War Warhammer 1, which was brought into Total War Warhammer 2. People complained about it a lot. They sucked. And then in Warhammer 3, they kind of attempted to tackle it, but they didn't do a very good job of it, with the walls still being crap, the butt ladders, and the supply system with being able to spawn these towers like a siege defense game. None of it was well received. It's one of those things where you can pretty much rally the entire community behind you and be like, yeah, the entirety of the community, by like a handful of people, like, yeah, the sieges in Total Warhammer 3 suck. It's one of the few things that you can actually get unanimous support behind, more or less. So it's good they're finally getting to it again. They've made some adjustments here and there throughout Warhammer 3, like not being able to capture the main capture point unless you've also captured the semi-main capture point, because you used to just be able to sneak in and capture either one of them, and then you just win the battle that way, because the AI would just basically just not care that you captured one of their points, because especially with stalking units. And so just sieges just used to be totally ridiculous. They still kind of are. It's just they've toned it down a little bit. Walls are still a massive problem because they're basically useless thanks to butt ladders, but it looks like they're going to tackle that. So it seems as though the Proving Grounds beta, you'll be able to log into that from the 24th of July to the 7th of August. It is entirely up to you if you want to do it. It's completely optional, but it gives you an opportunity to try out some sieges and see what they're doing, and if you don't like what they're doing, you can send them feedback and maybe they'll make some tweaks. It's probably one of those things that they're never going to get perfect in Total War Warhammer 3, but improvements are still better than nothing. And I kind of suspect that this might be one of the reasons why the DLC is getting delayed. It does seem as though there is a lot more focus on improving the core gameplay that's currently playable and not leaving huge portions of the game in a really terrible state, even though it's been that way for years now. And rather than add new content, which I'm all for. I mean, we're apparently getting some reworks for the Lizardmen and Tomb Kings. I'm looking forward to that. And if they make some improvements to sieges, that's great. But I'm also kind of just not really invested in sieges at all. So we'll see what happens. But let's go through the Siege rework here. This was basically just an introduction to what it was all about. And then it looks like the guy from CA Sophia is tackling this issue here. So the number one issue, removal of, it's calling it pocket ladders. Nobody calls it pocket ladders. They call it butt ladders or ass ladders or ass ladders or whatever. So obviously he can't put that into the blog. But yeah, pocket ladders, we know what he's talking about. So what we changed, the biggest change that will be focused on the most in this update is the removal of so-called pocket ladders, which nobody calls pocket ladders, which allowed most infantry units to put, actually all, unless it's a monstrous infantry, all infantry units can do it. There are actually like one or two exceptions. If it's like Skarsnik, for example, he can't use pocket ladders, neither can Festus the Leech Lord, neither can weapons team units like Rattling Guns, they can't do it, but they're like weird because they're like multi-entity in a single entity sort of thing. Weird case, but anyway. Most infantry units to pull a siege ladder out of nothing and climb the walls of a settlement. In the Proving Ground, that is not going to be the case, and players and the AI, of course, will need to rely on different tactics to overcome the defenses of a well-fortified settlement. So, it just depends, I suppose, on how you look at this, but the AI, at least for my campaigns, are the ones that use the arse ladders way more than I do. I usually try to go in through a gate. That being said, I cheese sieges. Like, let's be real, I cheese the sieges. I have no interest in fighting them fairly. I usually try to win my sieges with like 1 or 2 heroes. I could usually do that. I usually don't need to do like a all-out assault. So I'm not sending my infantry lines to climb up on the walls that way because it's just not really efficient. Usually what I do, if I'm going to use infantry and I have to get into the settlement, I will sneak around to find an undefended section of their wall, send one guy up through the ladders, open the gates, and then get everyone else in through that section. But the AI doesn't do that. I wonder what's going to happen now without Arse ladders. Will ladders just not be in the game, or will ladders start where they'll be able to carry it, or will be ladders like from Rome 2 where they're like a really small, low-tech siege tower sort of, and you just slowly push them up to the wall, starting off with 4 or whatever it is they want to do with it. Be interesting to see because they don't go into too much detail with this. So why we changed it, because everybody hates it. That's the only thing they need to say here. Everybody universally hates Arse ladders, I think. There's always going to be like 1 or 2 people be like, not me, I think the Arse ladders are perfect the way they are. Always going to get it. You're never going to get 100% consensus on anything. The sky is blue. No, legend, it's actually... water is wet. No, legend, it's actually... You know, no matter what it is, no matter how obvious it is, you're always going to have somebody has to be devil's advocate. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. You guys all know that. But I know, but there's got to be somebody that disagrees. So I just want to preempt it. So whatever. They're still going to get it. Anyway, there are 2 main reasons why we want to introduce this fundamental change to how sieges work in the game. Gameplay and immersion. Total War always strives to depict battles in a realistic way. And yes, in our world, dragons and giant flaming heads are counted as realistic. Okay, so on this note here, realistic within the how the world actually works. Like within Warhammer Fantasy, there's supposed to be magic. So yeah, we get that. Like dragons are supposed to do that. But I would say that Total War games in general, especially in the historical side of things, have become significantly less realistic on the battlefield in recent years. Probably achieving the most realistic battles were in like Shogun 2, I guess, or even Rome 1 and Medieval 2, because you took a lot of artillery to break down a section of wall. You climb off the wall. If they're standing on the wall, they'd fall off. Units wouldn't run out of the city when they broke. They would run into the city to go and fight to the death at the last spot. There was loads of realism. Like you had to manually move the towers up to the wall. They could climb up the wall through the towers, through the ladders, and actually climb back down the walls. All this kind of stuff. A lot of this stuff has been lost along the way with Total War, and it's just been sort of dumbed down. Like for example, reload animations was a big thing with Warhammer 1. I think they've started doing a little bit more with the reload animations. I don't really check it that much. But I remember with like Thunderers, they would just basically stand there and then just shoot again. But there was no reload animation. Whereas you go back to Medieval 2 as an example, and the gun units, when you finally got access to them, they sit there bloody reloading for like 5 minutes, doing the whole animation, and then do the same thing. Same thing with Empire Total War. You had the whole reload animation. Same thing with the cannons as well. And then Warhammer, they just cut that out. It's like, well, we don't need... it's not realistic in a fantasy world to reload the cannon. They just magically put the cannon in there, as the dwarves. So I think that was largely done for, cutting corners for budget reason. But Total War battles in general are probably the most realistic depiction of a battle that you're going to see anywhere else. Maybe Manor Lords might be able to do something with it, but it's too small scale now to really, at this stage, to really say it's a Total War competitor. But we'll see how that goes. All projectiles are physically simulated. Shields are providing protection only from the front. Types of hit reactions are based on relation between the impact force, which is different from damage of the attacker, and the mass of the defender. So an example of this that I'm thinking of is like if you have Scarbrand and you charge through a unit of infantry, and it's not your weapon strength that's taken into consideration, but the relative difference in mass while you're charging dishes out the damage. Same thing as if you like knock a person off a hill and they fall far enough, they break their neck and die. So this is something that is more frequently seen in Total War Warhammer compared to Warhammer 3 compared to Warhammer 2, for example. Even though it's not perfect and there are many aspects that can be improved, we believe that the ability to pull a huge ladder out of your ass can be quite immersion breaking for the players, and it takes away from the more strategic planning of the battle. In addition, this makes walls almost obsolete. This is the main thing that I had a problem with. It does make... There's just no point to the walls. If the walls are no hindrance whatsoever to the attacker, and in fact, they're actually kind of a hindrance to the defender, because if you've got units that are fighting in melee up on the wall, and you've got some archer units down on the ground, you can't really shoot up at the wall to do anything. Also, the towers don't shoot sideways, so they don't fire at the defender. So there's no real advantage to fighting up on the walls. So the only advantage is just use the towers, and then as soon as they're past the towers, they just get up on the wall. You just give up the wall straight away, which is completely immersion breaking, because that would have never fucking happened in any battle whatsoever. They just give up the walls straight away because the walls are fucking useless. It's the towers that were useful, not the walls. And every single unit in the game can break down the gate without a battering ram. This makes walls almost obsolete. Allows enemies to bypass them with ease while making the defending choke points inside the settlement the obvious choice. This is not how we want sieges to feel. I really doubt that they're going to be able to fix this just with removal of pocket ladders. It will definitely help so that infantry, if they do manage to get up on the ladder, they'll have to concentrate up certain areas, which will make it easier for you to keep them in the choke points at the wall so that you can focus on the towers firing longer. So it definitely will help, but I still think that fighting up on the walls is probably still not going to be particularly favorable for the players, especially if you're playing with any sense of like AI cheats, which I know most of you guys don't, but if you do, it still won't feel good to fight on the walls, probably. How will these changes affect you in the game? These changes will make your strategic decisions more important. I think it means tactical decisions. Strategic decisions are on the campaign map. Much more important, and have you plan your approach or defense of a siege more carefully. And if you don't like them and prefer to get the slaughter faster, you can always turn the pocket ladders back on the options menu. Just make sure you do that before you actually get into the battle. I don't... Look, I'm mixed thoughts about this. I think having it optional is definitely good, but I think sometimes they can give you too many options. It's like, make a fucking decision on how you want the game to play. And I guess the problem here is that the game has been played this way for 9 years, and now they're taking it away. And some people are just going to be too set in their ways and be like, well, I don't want this change. I'm not used to change. I just don't want this patch to happen. And so giving them the option to do that. I mean, with CA Sophia, they're pretty good at giving you loads of different ways to play the campaign. But for me personally, I just want them to design how they want it to make the game, make it a default, and then just add like 3 different difficulty options, and then that's it. And I don't want to have to click all these different buttons. You know, the same thing with like the endgame crises and stuff. I just turn all that shit off for the most part, because it's just a waste of time for me when I'm trying to play for fun. So I personally will probably just leave it off and then never untick it. I'm curious to you guys, how many of you guys are going to leave the pocket... Now I'm calling it pocket ladders. How many of you guys are going to leave the butt ladders on so that you'll still have access to essentially the old system? Anyway, siege equipment rebalance. What we've changed and why we've changed it. The removal of pocket ladders requires a ton of other changes to make sure the game functions without them. The siege equipment availability has been rebalanced, and players will now be able to field more siege towers and battering rams in siege battles to compensate for the lack of ladders. So it's still just the 2 siege equipment that you can purchase. You don't have access to ladders. I think that's lame if that's the case. Like, you're just removing it from the game. Because, like, in Rome 2, they introduced... You besiege the settlement, and you could attack it immediately. You have 4 ladders. And these were slow to move up. They're sort of like weak siege towers. And I believe they brought that back for Total Warfare. So couldn't you add that back in quite easily for Total Warhammer 3? Like, add those kind of ladders in? Or make it so that... I mean, carrying the ladders up to the wall like they did in, like, Medieval 2, I... probably don't expect them to do that. I think some people would like that. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is to that. So there'll be more available. So instead of making 1 or 2 per turn, you might be able to make 3 or 4 to compensate for not having arse ladders. Stats like speed and durability of that equipment have also been changed to make them more effective at their intended functions. In addition, we are changing the way siege attrition works and turning it into a linear progression, making it be stronger and stronger with each consecutive turn a settlement remains under siege. That's interesting, because currently it's like you just lose at base 10% of your troops every single turn. So if you had 100, it would go down to 90, then it would go down to 80, 70 until you had none left. So based on what I'm interpreting here is that maybe if you had 100 troops in a unit, it would go to 99, then to 97. And so basically each turn, the amount of casualties would go up more, but initially it takes a while before you actually start taking significant casualties. I definitely think that's a better system, but I still think what they did with Total War Attila was the best system, which they had in Warhammer 1 and I don't know if they had it in Warhammer 1. It's been such a long time since I played, but they had it in Warhammer 2, where you get a certain amount of turns of grace before you start taking any attrition. Where you besiege a settlement, and it's like 3 turns or 4 turns before they'll take any attrition whatsoever. And then once they start taking attrition, it's like a couple of turns and it's over. I kind of like that system better because that way you had time to bring in a relief force to try to lift the siege as opposed to just constantly getting whittled down. Because this system that's currently in, you're sort of incentivized to, if it's possible, sally out and just prevent the siege from letting them kill off 50% of your army if you've got no hope of bringing in reinforcements in a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that goes, but usually I don't let the sieges go on for very long, personally. Okay, so how will these changes affect you in the game? Players will now need less manpower to construct siege equipment, which means it'll be more readily available when sieging settlements. On the other hand, settlements are going to be a tad less susceptible to siege attrition in the early stages of the siege, while taking less overall turns to fully succumb to it. So yeah, again, the base time at the moment is 10 turns, so what does that mean, like 5 turns? And there's obviously various things you can do to modify it. So defensive adjustments, what we've adjusted. We adjusted the stats of the defensive towers and gates. Towers will now be slightly deadlier, but have much shorter range, while gates will be more durable when it comes to attacks from regular and some monstrous infantry, but less so against battering rams. This is probably the right call, and it will definitely negatively impact on how I siege, which I don't have a problem with because it's too easy for me. Because yeah, I never make battering rams. What for? Every unit is a battering ram. What do you need battering rams for? It's a redundant construction. So they've already done this once before in Total War Warhammer 3. They've actually made the gates more durable, which just basically meant it took longer to get in there, which wasn't that big of a deal unless you were trying to rush in. But what I would do to sort of counter this is that I would just go knock down the gate in one area. Obviously, it would take a while, and they would bring their forces over to defend that position. And then once I've knocked down the gate, I'd be like, well, I'm not going in through here. And I'll just run off to a different section of the wall and start knocking down a different gate. And then their army goes all the way back over to that section of the gate that I'm now starting to knock down. And then once they've fully committed over there, I just run back to the other gate that I first destroyed and just walk straight through because I haven't repaired the gate. And didn't leave anyone behind because I didn't anticipate that I was just going to go back until I could just run in through the gate. We'll see if this is just like a nuisance or will it actually make battles like these sort of sieges more difficult. Because one of the things that the AI probably really should be able to do is actually shoot at you or drop rocks on you from above when you're trying to break down the gate. Which currently they can't. If you've got like a single entity smashing down the gate, there are only a handful of units that, when standing above you, will be able to shoot down at you. The rest of them just go, well, we'll just wait until you're done, and just sit there and be like, well, we've got 16,000 health we got to knock down, and we're knocking it down 100 at a time. Okay, well, I'll see you in half an hour. And then just sit there and wait. Making the battle take longer is not making the battle better. So a big problem with some of these things here is that the AI needs to be able to respond and make it more urgent to get in there, because it currently isn't. I could just take my time and basically play these sieges one-handed because the AI is just so passive. But anyway, so yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with all that. But we'll have to wait until the actual patch to see if there's any meaningful changes with it. Well, we've changed it. Towers currently... oh yeah, that's right, the towers as well. So this is probably not going to be much of a hindrance to me. I mean, they'll be deadlier, but I usually don't get shot by towers anyway because I always stay out. Like, the current range is 350. Most artillery in the game has a higher range than 350. Well, there is quite a lot of them that have that, so I just shoot down the towers. It didn't mention if the towers are going to be more durable, so shooting them down with artillery might take up more ammo now. I'm not entirely sure. But whatever this much shorter range means, that just means that more types of artillery are now going to be able to shoot with impunity at these towers. Because, like, for example, if you were using a organ gun with the dwarfs, I'm pretty sure regular towers actually outrange a organ gun, and so your organ guns had to get within range of a tower and would get fired at a little bit, but you just put like a single entity out in front of them and they just draw that at the fire. So now maybe the organ guns will be able to shoot with impunity at those towers. Again, not entirely sure because they're not giving us an actual stat number here. But I think that overall this will make it easier for the player to assault, especially if you've got artillery in your army. But will make it more difficult for the AI since they're not trying to cheese the sieges. They don't sit there and bomb you into oblivion before launching the attack. They just go straight for it. So with them being able to get fewer units up on the walls quickly without the butt ladders and the towers being more deadly, there may be a lot more incentive to actually hold the walls, if for no other reason than for the towers absolutely just murdering the enemy forces. Now, he does say it's only slightly deadlier, so if it's a tier 1 tower, I don't expect it's going to just mow down people like it's World War One friggin' machine guns. But currently, like, tier 1 towers are... they might kill 10 or 20 enemy infantry, but that's not really that impactful. It's the higher tier towers that really do a whole lot. And then they just don't fire fast enough. They don't get enough opportunity to shoot to make any meaningful damage throughout the battle, especially considering their firing arcs don't fire backwards or to the sides. So once you've gotten into their blind spots, well, that's it. That's the end of the towers. And that's always been a massive problem. They did fix it a little bit. Like in Warhammer 2, the towers were more narrow in what they could fire, and then they widened it a little bit with Warhammer 3. But they've still got blind spots everywhere, so that's just not that big of an issue. Okay, so why we change it? Towers currently feel quite annoying for the attacker when they start shooting immediately after deployment, leaving no room for maneuvers or executing strategic attack plans, while the gates feel like they can easily be breached by mundane infantry, making specialized equipment, like the battering ram, obsolete. Yeah, not my experience with it, I guess. I wouldn't say that the towers felt annoying because I knew what their ranges were. I just stood out of their range. There's actually only a couple of maps in the game where the towers have full coverage over your deployment zone. So I'm thinking of like a dwarf settlement specifically, but there's a tiny little section in the corner where if you put all of your troops there, they actually can't. There's actually a little bit of a blind spot. But pretty much every other map in the game has got plenty of blind spots. So only if you deploy within their range would that be a nuisance, I suppose. But whatever. How will these changes affect you in the game? These changes will allow you to maneuver outside a settlement you are attacking without being harassed, or open up to opportunity for you to batter it with artillery more easily, while also making defender less helpless against direct fast infantry attacks. Well, this is true in the first place. That's true right now. So I don't know what game he's playing. There's only a couple of, like, 1 or 2 maps where that is actually a struggle. Everywhere else, there's plenty of deployment zones where there's nothing being able to shoot at you. So maybe it'll help the player more when defending, not necessarily making attacking more difficult. Battle AI improvements. So we can't just remove pocket ladders without teaching the battle AI how to play without them. This, I think, was the main reason why they didn't do it up until now. This was the main excuse. Basically, if you take away butt ladders, the AI is just like, well, I'm been programmed to do this and now I can't do it anymore. What do I do? So they've had to go in and fix over 50 issues related to it, apparently. So for the proving grounds, we fixed over 50 issues related to how the battle AI plays or reacts to certain situations on both the attack and defending side of sieges. As some of those are not completely related to pocket ladders, these changes will be present even if the pocket ladders are turned on from the option menu. We'll see what those changes are going to be like. But anyway, why we changed it. Battle AI has always been tricky to get right, but that is most obvious in sieges, and we are really trying to make it play better and react to the player's actions in a more realistic way. We are not saying that we have fixed the battle AI, but hopefully with these improvements it will behave a lot more convincingly and offer a more interesting challenge. Well, we'll have to wait and see with that. The AI is definitely the biggest problem, I think, when it comes to sieges, because it's just awful. Especially when defending a siege, they just sit there. They don't know what to do. And there's just so many ways to sneak in and screw them over. In many ways, walled city sieges are the easiest battles to play, as long as you have like a couple of units that just are not affected by the siege issues. Like a flying spellcaster or something like that. A lord or a hero on a horse. You just like run around the city and their garrison is just... they can't catch you, sort of thing. It's hilarious the first 100 times, but It's not so funny now, but anyway. How will these changes affect your game? These changes will offer less weird behavior from the battle AI during sieges and allow it to be able to play the game without the use of pocket. Yeah, look, yeah, maybe less, but I'd be very surprised if I wasn't able to get the AI to do some real stupid shit pretty damn quickly with whatever changes. They're never going to be able to get the AI to be able to be as like good as the player, and I'm not expecting that. So my expectations on this stuff here is not particularly high, and that's fine. At least they're attempting it. Siege map improvements. What we've changed with this update, we're also starting an initiative of reworking old Siege maps to make them play and feel better. For now, we have only done 3, one for Skaven, Empire, and Orcs, but there will be more to come in the future after getting your feedback on them. Okay, here's an idea as well. One thing that they said in an early blog of Total War Warhammer 3, which ended up being a complete lie, surprise, surprise, they said that there would be such a huge variety of maps that you would go through an entire play session and not encounter the same map more than once. Bullshit. Okay, because it's just not true whatsoever. You will fight, basically Skaven maps, there is only one map for Walled City Sieges for Skaven. They've only got one. And you will fight the same one every single time. And in many instances, the map might have, within a particular culture, 2 or maybe 3 at the most different instances of like a different map, and many of those maps are reskinned. So for example, there is a high elf map and a greenskin map that are only aesthetically different but functionally identical. The layout is exactly the same, the everything's placement is exactly the same. It's just that one has high elf buildings and one has greenskin buildings. And that's not what I would call variety of maps. So if they add more variety of maps, I think that's also really good, because basically, once you've figured out a map's weak points, which isn't really that difficult, every time that you go up against that particular map, which you will over the course of a campaign many, many, many times, because there's only, in total, 10? There's not that many. It makes it so that it becomes very predictable, and that's the problem with these sieges as well. It's like, oh, it's this map again? Well, I'll just do this exact same thing I did in the previous battle. Oh, it's this map again? Okay, well, I'll just do the exact same thing. And putting in more maps with more different challenges will hopefully vary that up a bit, so that people, in my opinion, don't get that level of siege fatigue that at least I experience with these sieges. It's just not interesting fighting the exact same siege map over and over and over again. But anyway, siege maps can often feel a little too cramped with little space to maneuver both inside and outside the settlements. With our reworks, we are looking to open up those maps a bit, allowing more approaches to the victory points. So this is only a problem if you're using massive armies. This is why I would usually say, like, siege defenses are only worth fighting. Well, not only worth fighting, but they're easier to defend if you have a smaller army going up against a smaller army. But as soon as the AI is bringing like 4 full stacks and you've got 2 full stacks inside the settlement, it gets so cramped and your units just don't fight as well. There just isn't enough space to utilize in those situations, and those are the more common scenarios, especially in the later stages of the campaign. So yeah, if they can open things up a little bit more in some areas, that'd be good. Then it says, what's cooking? Everything we've listed here are just the first steps for us to get sieges where we want them to be. And we are looking at this as a long-lasting effort to improve the game. In future, we have a wish list of possible options to explore, such as introducing ladders as a new constructible. Okay, so they don't have ladders as a constructible building anymore. Basically, this is just being removed from the game, but they're possibly going to add it back later. Rebalancing the way garrisons work and what units are available to them from all factions. Changing the way that the buildings of towers or barricade works, as well as more battle AI and pathfinding upgrades. Pathfinding upgrades would be great. One big thing is it'd be great if the gates are open, that units would actually prioritize going through the gate. It's just like, hey, I want you, who's standing right outside the gate, to go to the other side of the gate. Okay, bro. I'll go up the ladder. No, dude. The gate's open. You just need to walk through the door. No. I'll go up the ladder. It's like, fuck you, man. Go through the damn gate. You know, we've all suffered this problem, and you got to babysit them. And you can even tell when you, like, just put them in one at a time. You can tell them to go ladder, right? No, gate. And it's so fucking frustrating because it's just go through the fucking gate. It's not hard. Every other fucking Total War game can do it. For the most part. And That would be really good pathfinding upgrades. I think that's a big problem with Warhammer 3. They didn't have this problem as much in Warhammer 2. There's always been some degree of pathfinding issues, but Warhammer 3 specifically got some real bad pathfinding problems. In many ways, Warhammer 3 is a technical downgrade on Total War Warhammer 2. The way that units function and the way that the game plays out on just like an individual battle and campaign level is actually inferior to Warhammer 2. They still haven't caught up after all these years. Because in Warhammer 2, units were more responsive. There was fewer pathfinding issues. The main appeal to Warhammer 3, obviously, is that there's a lot of quality of life improvements, and there's just shitloads more content. There's no way to play as Khorne, for example, in Warhammer 2. And I think that's why there's still so many people playing Warhammer 2, because just functionally, if they don't want to play as Khorne or any of the new factions, well, then they'll just play the High Elves. High Elves play better in Warhammer 2. And I think that's a big problem. I still can't believe we're dealing with this kind of shit more than 3 years on from the launch of Warhammer 3. It just goes to show you how badly they fucked the launch of this game and how much they dropped the ball. Really up until this point, sort of. It's great that they're getting to it. This shouldn't be being done 3.5 years after the game came out. This should have been stuff that was done very early on. This should have been the stuff that was really focused on before Immortal Empires came out. But whatever, we're here now. We just got to deal with it. It's good that we're finally here. It's you got to take whatever win you can get, even if it's like a massive L with a tiny W. All right. Also, rebalancing the way garrisons work and what units are available for them. I think that's a good idea. And one way to look at this, always look towards mods. They've always got better ideas. SFO does a great idea. Whereas you've got garrison buildings that'll provide you with a large number of garrisons. But if you make like a military building, it'll provide like one unit from that military building in the garrison. So what SFO ends up doing is your garrisons, as you build up your settlement, they'll be more varied based on the buildings that you put in there. So if you build like an infantry barracks, you'll get, like, let's say you're playing as greenskins. At low tier, it'll be like a gobbo unit, and then an orc unit, and then eventually at high tier, it'll be a black orc unit that's added to the garrison, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, you basically can customize your garrisons based on the building rather than be like, well, you can get a garrison building and it'll provide you with a set number of units that you don't want in the garrison. And there's certain garrisons, such as Skaven, which are just so utter rubbish, they might as well just not exist. It's like, well, you have 20 units of clan rats. Good luck against these chosen units that are coming at you. Great, can't do anything with that. And there's like no warp fire throwers or anything. There's no interesting units for the garrisons of these Skaven, and there's no point even building the defensive structure just for the garrison alone. So if they rebalance that kind of stuff, some factions do it way better than others. Like Dwarven units, their garrisons are fine, but Skaven, as an example, their garrisons are just such rubbish. Probably the worst in the game. The Empire has a way too heavy focus on melee infantry in the garrison. They really need to sort of make it at least 50-50, I think, in terms of missile and melee, because missile units are going to be what allows you to overcome overwhelming odds, not having 7 units of swordsmen which have no advantage whatsoever against anything. They're just stats, basically, empty stats. So, yeah, this is really important, I think, for garrisons. One of the reasons why I try to avoid fighting siege defenses at all is because garrisons are such rubbish when I'm playing as those particular factions. Last but not least, we understand that sometimes a lot of us just want to keep painting the campaign map in our chosen color and not waste time with sieges or battles in general. So we are already hard at work at polishing out, with the heavy use of hammers and axes, that auto-resolver to make it function properly. So this is interesting. So you actually totally can just bypass sieges for the most part by just putting the battle difficulty down to easy and just auto-resolving it, as long as you're bringing like something of a sensible force. Be like, well, I brought my 1 lord and 1 spearman unit to auto-resolve against this full stack of chosen in here, and it wouldn't let me win. Yeah, go fucking build an army. Don't expect that's going to just auto-resolve, get rid of that. You have to at least bring an army. But yeah, you can, if it says Valiant Defeat and auto-resolve, then you can put it down to, if it says Valiant Defeat and auto-resolve, if you're playing like, let's say hard battle difficulty, put it down to easy. 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to auto-resolve, win it, and probably not lose a unit. Easy auto-resolve allows you to just cheat your way through a battle you don't want to do. So it'll be interesting to see if they adjust that, because one of the problems with easy battle difficulty, and it really should be the game really should tell you what it's doing, because I've already made a video on this and it's got a lot of views, so a lot of people have seen it. But for new players, they play on easy difficulty and they don't realize the psychology behind what's going on. And I've explained this before, and I'm pretty sure Creative Assembly would have seen that video because it's got like 500,000 views, 300,000 or 400,000 views. I can't remember what it's up to now. And the psychology of it is that the battle says they're going to get a decisive victory. They fight the battle manually and they get like a Pyrrhic victory. And so it lowers their confidence because they did worse than auto-resolve. And the game says if you fight the battle manually, you'll do better than auto-resolve. And so the psychology gets in their head and they think they're shit at the game. But it's the game is being shit, not the other way around. Because the multiplier for easy battle difficulty is like 300%. Your one army is worth like 3 armies on easy battle difficulty. It's such a big difference between easy and normal. It's like easy, it's plus 300%. And then on normal difficulty, it's like maybe plus 50%. And then on hard and very hard, it's like there's no difference between your forces and the enemy forces in auto-resolve. With certain other distinguishing factors, like if you're going up against a legendary lord, they'll get an auto-resolve boost. If you're assaulting a settlement, that'll give an auto-resolve boost. So it'd be interesting to see how they manage to do that. Sieges is not something that's easy to deal with, especially when you're dealing with so many sieges throughout a campaign. Because there's so many settlements and every province has a walled siege. So yeah, it can't be an easy thing to do, but I definitely appreciate what CA Sophia is doing here. And I want to point out as well that I don't have any problems with what they're attempting to do here. I just think that it really should have been done ages ago. Again, it's not CA Sophia's fault because they were working on their own stuff at the time. But this is stuff we should have been seeing in 2022, realistically. But it is what it is. But yeah, provide your feedback where needed. Participate in the beta. Love to hear your thoughts on the Siege rework. Is this something you're excited for, or do you not give a shit and you're still just going to auto-resolve the sieges and just skip them, basically? Anyway, guys, that's the end of this one. Let me know in the comments below. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.